And I came to this by being in a failed Christian community. I came to it from there. The community I was from, the village I was from, has known hard times. It's never really recovered since the closure of the coal mines. Poverty's everywhere, alcohol's everywhere, drugs is everywhere. You could go to the local village, everyone was taking drugs in the village pubs. Everybody, cocaine, ketamine, ecstasy. Those who took heroin were out on their own doing it somewhere else. There were people smoking heroin in the toilets sometimes at the parties we would go to. Everyone was taking something. Because everyone had just been won. Everyone's body and minds had been won by the enemy. And standing in the centre of all of that, every time you came outside a pub, would be a church steeple somewhere. With black windows and a closed door. And if I'd had control of a church like that, right now, I'd have been out there talking to them. And then if I'd had the knowledge I have now, I'd be telling them, I know a way to liberate you from this. And to give you a life far better than the one you live now, with more excitement, with more joy, with more love, with more stimulus. But I didn't. So every time I came out of those parties and out of those pubs and clubs, I'd walk past the church with the closed doors and the black windows.
I heard of a man and a seed that's been sown. Whispers and rumors of a village that's grown with love as its welcome when death's at its door. Sees the richness of sharing with the sick, with the poor.
Hey guys, I just recorded another video speaking about meditation, and I mentioned in there that I got the feeling that growing up in the West, growing up as a young Christian male, that Christianity was really struggling in its current form for many persons to connect with them. And I simply did that by looking around and saying every village, town and city I see is filled with churches, more than one, even in villages. Always more than one church. In everywhere I went, there was always more than one. But everywhere I went, there was also a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. And there was also a lot of drugs where I was from, and there was a lot of immorality and lies. And ultimately, I very much got the feeling that Christianity wasn't working. Not that there's anything wrong with it. And not that there was anything faulty with the teachings of Jesus Christ, because it's there, it's clear as day what we need to do. But in Native American belief systems, you have the red road and the black road. And the red road is ultimately the path of righteousness, if you would, in Christianity. To be righteous is to walk the red road, the place of love. The black road, I think you can all understand, is the place of darkness, the place of wrongdoing, the place of unrighteousness. Now, I got the strong feeling after a while of trying to find God in amongst all of this sinful world I'd lived in. I was unfortunate that the enemy had gotten his claws in me and pulled me away. And I was just dwelling in a complete state of unrighteousness constantly. And as I looked, I had to come to the conclusion that the Western system was walking the black road. It wasn't walking the red road, it was walking the black road. And this is not myself being negative towards Christianity. It's not. But what it is, it's I saying, can we not help it to get better? Can we not help it to improve? Because if there's a church in every village, town and city, why are so many people lost there? Why are they struggling to reach people? Now, I've given this example before, but if there were practical tools taught by the preachers and pastors and reverends of these establishments and these churches, I as a young man, when centered and surrounded by persons taking drugs, first and foremost, I'd have to come to a point, which is largely down to God a lot of the time, where I want to change. where I want the light. But also sometimes you can look to the light and believe that you're getting light, but you're getting darkness. And this is what many persons are doing. So in an ideal world, there would be a practical way, first of all, for a church in the West when I was there taking drugs and partying and just being unrighteous and indulging in debauchery. That church would be able to give me an example of what life would be like, a pure and true life. And I have a strong belief from being in that world that many of the young men and women in there were just seeking to have a place of love, a partner that they love, a home, some meaning. And that, I still believe that. And God has shown me that recently, because inside that world, due to my own lens, if you like, I guess is the best way to put it, my own lens, the way I looked upon the world. There's a truck pulled up behind me if you're wondering what that light is. My own lens upon the world was that of that world of clubs and drug taking and so on and so forth, that this place was only full of godlessness. That was my belief because of my own personal experience. That is how I experienced it. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. I'm going to move my camera because I think that's going to interfere, possibly. So, hold on. Right, because I know these guys, they're breaking stones, which is what the child labourers do, and they'll put the big beam on and it'll just blind you all, so I've spun it around anyway. I believe that world was nothing but full of sin. And God recently taught me a beautiful lesson in a beautiful way, because he brought that world to help me. And I sat and I said, wow, I met these wonderful guys from last night at DJ Save My Life Foundation. And I said, you know what, this world I was in, I'd suppressed a lot of it and said it's godless, but this was my experience. And God wanted me to see, because I used to say to God in prayer, can you not reach into that world? And there's a full army of people can help the planet in there. There's a full army of persons with a decent education, with access to electronics and whatever else to be able to help. There's a full army of people spending money in clubs and so on that could be spending money on feeding a child. Could you not access it? And all along he was in there. And I was stupid and arrogant because I should have realised, of course he was in there. Where there are humans, there is God. However, it does still remain that predominantly the Western culture is walking the black road, as it is said in Native American talk. And I always used to want, since I found God again, because I had God as a child, lost him again, and it came back to him. Since I found God again, I always wondered how it could be that the church could have pulled me out of that. Not the positive side. There might be as has been proven to me by last night at DJ Save My Life Foundation. It's a long thing. I'll say Johnny because that's the guy who runs it in future. As was proven to me by meeting Johnny, God is in there and he's working his magic of service within there. And those guys are here to help us, and they're fundraising for us now, and they're working hard for these children. However, in my world back then, in that debaucherous side of things, just selfish, self-loving, self-stimulus, just horrificness that my life was, that many people still live in now, and I know they do. I often wondered here, how would the church have ever reached me? How could the church have reached me? And first of all, they need to find a way to give me an example of a better way of life. They need to show me people who are living an exciting life in service of God. And this is something they could do easily. There are many missions all over the world who are living very profoundly exciting lives. I'm blessed enough to be someone who lives a very stressful but very exciting life here. When I was a child and I watched a Kevin Costner movie, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, I told my mum I want to build a village one day, because they built a village in the trees and it seemed so simple that you could build a village in the forest. And for all I haven't built a village of tree houses, I've built a village. I've built a village. That's exciting. Believe me, when you go to bed at night and something bad's happened and you go, stop. With God, you have built a village these last few years. And outside, if I get too stressed, I can walk over to the children's home and see the little sleeping faces of these beautiful children. And I say, wow, that these children rely on the village you built with God. That's exciting. These things the church could show people. But then once they got you to come, what would happen right now if a church managed to get me, my former self, to go and to say, come to us? And I'd say, okay, I'm coming. I'm seeking God, I'm coming. But I'm addicted to drugs at this point. And I say, what do I need to do? And they say, well, you need to pray to God to forgive you. And I say, okay, that makes sense. You need to forgive yourself. Okay, that makes sense. And then you need to stop taking the drugs. Okay, and then you need to stop behaving sexually immoral with all these women you're chasing around. Okay. And then you need to stop doing this and this. Okay, great. How do I do that? Ask God for guidance. God will help you. Okay. But the next day, the psychological and chemical impulses of my body are going to make me seek stimulus. Be they drugs, be they sexual immorality, be they whatever it is that I'm addicted to. My body is going to tell me that. God will not wipe you clear of that, because he built a reality based on logic and laws. And our bodies behave in the same way. And just as the enemy has spent his time, if you will, the negative lower nature of ourselves, programming your body to respond to a need for these stimulants, drugs, sex, so on and so forth, alcohol, whatever else, so God needs to spend time doing it as well. But there, straight away, the church would have failed. They would lose me. Even if they got me interested to come and take a look, they would then lose me. Because I was walking the black road and insect going down my back. I was walking the black road, and you can't just tell someone, there's the red road, walk on that one. You can tell them what the red road is, you can tell them what the path of righteousness is, but you can't just say, hey, just go that way. Because we see it doesn't work, guys. That's why we have drug rehabilitation clinics, that's why we have psychologists, that's why we have all of these things. Because the human vehicle does not work that way. Now, imagine if the pastors and preachers adhered to esoterics. They adhered to the fact that it directs you that you must find dominion over your five senses. And the only possible logical solution for that is meditation. Now imagine that my younger self went to that church. That's my hair, not an insect. Imagine my younger self went to that church, and the preacher, the pastor, the vicar, the bishop, whoever I speak to, understood esoterics and understood the importance of overcoming the lower nature, as many understand it, but had practical tools on how to do that. Imagine they first of all sat me down and said, this is going to take you a little bit of time, but your first step is to find a place in yourself without thought. A place modern science calls alpha. A place, Greek mysticism, called water. A story that the Bible conveyed as baptism would be you finding a way to stop all of this constant habitual behaviour which is destroying you, and raise up to a place of no human thought, because that's where God can direct you with his angels. Angels simply being photons, light particles that carry information that travel on angles of light, if you want to just get science about it. And then I could say, okay, great, let me try that. Okay, I'll teach you how to do that. Do these breathing exercises, do this, do this. But remember, it's going to take time. And can you imagine the difference? If I go back and week by week I say, wow, yeah, okay, I found a way to stop doing this now. I found a way to stop doing this. And then this pastor or preacher could say, right, okay, maybe now it's time for you to try a fast so you can get really deep into your subconscious and tear those demons out of yourself or those habits and those behaviors of yours. I say, okay. You would make me a Christian forever if someone had done that to me back then. Because you suffer when you take those drugs, you suffer when you live that life, and they would have liberated me from my suffering. But I turned to those things and I didn't get the support required. What I got was, ask Jesus to do it for you. And he doesn't. And it makes you stop believing. Now I can pray to God and ask him for help. God built this village. He used me as his hands and feet. But right now I can pray to God and say, God, imagine I'm smoking cigarettes. God, I'm addicted to cigarettes. Please make it go away. He might lead me to someone who can teach me about fasting to stop it. He might give me a book or something that's going to help. But overnight, he's not going to do it for you. You're still going to have to do the legwork. It's the same if you call out and ask Jesus to do it for you. You're still going to have to do the legwork. And this is... all I see is that society's on the black road. And we need to bring it back to the red road. And the foundations to bring it back to the red road exist in every culture. These centralized points of organized religion, whichever they may be, they exist. These buildings, these places of worship. But they don't know how to tackle the modern day problems because they're not using logical, practical means. It's wonderful to pray for one another. It's a necessity. It's wonderful to go and worship together. But if you want to reach those people who are making society walk on the black road, we've got to do more. And there's got to be a way for things to evolve to suit it. Because as the organised religions are not evolving to suit it, the enemy is evolving. And he is using everything in his power. And while we have these Stone Age religious establishments which don't do outreach into the communities and help them, the enemy is inside the home of those people, stealing their hearts, stealing their minds. It's in their pockets, in their drugs, it's inside them, in their desires. It's inside their televisions, inside their computers, their phones. It's inside the music they listen to. And the enemy's evolving. And God's practical tools to fight are not evolving with it. Because with such a poisoned society at this point, a poisoned youth, the minds are poisoned, they're addicted, they're hooked on things. You've got young men hooked on masturbation and pornography. You've got young children in school hooked on marijuana and alcohol. You've got people hooked on sexual immorality. You've got people who only work so they can go out at the weekend. You've got people hooked on gambling. They can gamble with their TV, with their phone. And the person's minds are now poisoned. They are now peppered and filled with demons. And sitting people down, singing a hymn, and telling them to read a certain passage about people in the olden times who walked around in the deserts not working. And Christianity can do it. Islam can do it for its own communities. Buddhism can do it. It can all be done. But we first have to accept that this way is not working, and when someone's making suggestions, using stuff which is a documented historical ideology like esoterics to show us that we can teach our youth to be disciplined and still be in line with the Christian faith, for example, which is the predominant faith in the West where I grew up. And what have we got to lose at this point? What have we got to lose? Because the enemy is already winning. Windows to his sin are everywhere, but windows to God are nowhere in the West. It's up to the establishments to create them. The churches can create them in their communities, they can do it. But they have to be able to modify with the times, just as the enemy has modified with the times. So I would just love to see the church start teaching its pastors and preachers how to practically take the bad behaviours out of people or the demons out of people. But if I went now and took someone taking drugs to the local preacher in the village I was from, he would tell him to pray to Jesus for a solution. And with any blessing of God, then he would bring that young man or woman to someone who could teach them meditation, because that's the only guaranteed way they're ever going to be able to overcome it. And that's a thing I see. And I came to this by being in a failed Christian community. I came to it from there. The community I was from, the village I was from, has known hard times. It's never really recovered since the closure of the coal mines. Poverty's everywhere, alcohol's everywhere, drugs is everywhere. You could go to the local village, everyone was taking drugs in the village pubs. Everybody, cocaine, ketamine, ecstasy. Those who took heroin out on their own doing it somewhere else. There were people smoking heroin in the toilets sometimes at the parties we would go to. Everyone was taking something. Because everyone had just been won. Everyone's body and minds had been won by the enemy. And standing in the centre of all of that, every time you came outside a pub, would be a church steeple somewhere. With black windows and a closed door. And if I'd had control of a church like that, right now, I'd have been out there talking to them. And then if I'd had the knowledge I have now, I'd be telling them, I know a way to liberate you from this, and to give you a life far better than the one you live now, with more excitement, with more joy, with more love, with more stimulus. But I didn't. So every time I came out of those parties and out of those pubs and clubs, I'd walk past the church with the closed doors and the black windows. So, I guess what I'm saying is churches should become more than a place of worship. They should become an outreach. Because the enemy's doing everything to reach into the lives of the youth today. And the older generations. Let's let God do the same thing. So, let's get ourselves back on the red road. And the best way to do that, first of all, is to heal yourself. And the next thing to do is to start healing others. But you're not going to do that by kneeling down and asking someone else to do it for you all the time. I kneel down and beg God for help with things here often, and He brings us help. But when I was addicted to drugs, I had to learn. I had to learn to go within myself. I had to learn to fast. This is what we should be teaching people. So, it tells you to in the esoteric mystic side of the Bible. It doesn't take anything away from the teachings of Christ, it adds to them. It just means he can get more followers because they know how to use their vehicle to escape the enemy. Okay. I think I said what I wanted to. God bless.